Have you ever felt like your mind refuses to slow down? Even when everything around you is still, there's a steady current of thoughts behind your eyes. A quiet storm you can't escape. You tell yourself to calm down, to stay present, but your mind doesn't listen. It moves through memories, analyzes every word, imagines countless futures that never occur. Even in silence, the noise is loud. You think, and then you think about thinking. You watch others laugh without effort, move through life with ease, love freely, and you wonder what it's like to exist without examining every emotion. For you, nothing feels simple. Every smile raises a question. Every goodbye becomes a full analysis. You feel deeply, think intensely, care strongly, and it becomes both a gift and a burden. You weren't always like this. There was a time when you simply felt without needing to understand. But gradually, your mind became your protection, a defense built from logic and memory to avoid pain. Psychology calls it hypervigilance, when the brain stays alert long after the danger is gone. Maybe you learned early that certainty isn't guaranteed, so you began reading the world carefully, predicting problems before they arrived. But such awareness has a cost. The more you analyze, the more disconnected you feel from life. Every emotion gets examined. Every moment passes through layers of thought. You become both participant and observer, unable to fully be present because you're busy interpreting everything. Neuroscience refers to this as analysis paralysis. When the mind gets stuck in endless possibilities, you start noticing patterns in others, in yourself, in relationships, in cycles of closeness and distance. You see truths many miss, the fragile threads holding connections together, the hidden fear behind someone's laughter. Yet the more you see, the harder belonging becomes. You seek understanding, but it isolates you. You want connection, but thinking too much pushes it away. There is a line between awareness and obsession, curiosity and self-strain, and deep thinkers often walk it alone. You live in a world that values fast answers, yet your mind seeks questions without simple solutions. So you search, through thoughts, dreams, late nights, not because you want discomfort, but because you feel compelled to know why. No one begins this way. Deep thinking often starts in quiet places. It starts softly. A child in a dim room, sitting on the floor while the voices rise behind a closed door. They don't know the words, but sense the tension. They study the pauses, the tone, the shift in breath. Before they can define emotions, they can feel them. So they learn early not to cry, not to demand, but to notice. Maybe you recall that feeling. Growing up where love felt uncertain, where warmth came and went. Maybe your parents weren't unkind, just distracted, distant, or overwhelmed by their own struggles. So you became the observer, the quiet one who learned to adapt, to notice every change, to sense conflict before anyone spoke. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, the coping strategy of a child who learns safety through awareness. The developing brain stretches to predict tone, mood, and risk. Overthinking begins not as intelligence, but instinct. The mind becomes a scanner, always searching for signs of trouble. You tell yourself it's curiosity or resilience, but beneath it lies fear masked as understanding, a need for control in a world that felt unpredictable. You learn to read people, to decode looks, to comfort others before yourself. You become the calm mediator, the young thinker trying to bring order with empathy. Attachment theory describes this clearly. When consistent love is absent, the mind fills the gaps with interpretation. You analyze silence, moods, every subtle expression, because your body is trying to feel safe. You start living more in your thoughts than in your emotions. Feelings turn into puzzles. Experiences become information. Thinking becomes your refuge. But depth brings isolation. While other children played freely, you were asking why people hurt each other, why they leave, why they lie. You felt older than your age. Too aware, too awake. You carried feelings heavier than your body could hold, so you stored them quietly. People mistook your silence for calm, not knowing your mind was full of questions. That child learned to survive through thought. Yet surviving is different from living. Reflection became protection. Awareness became armor. And even as you grew older, your mind continued watching, predicting, analyzing. The child who once observed quietly becomes an adult who cannot stop thinking. You wear insight like a second skin. Calm, thoughtful, difficult to penetrate. People admire your clarity. They seek your perspective, your interpretation, your meaning, but behind that understanding lies exhaustion. The tiredness of always being the one who knows, who understands, who carries the weight of awareness. You learn to survive by thinking. Living, however, is something you're still learning to do. You become the person who can explain what others cannot, who finds lessons where others only feel loss, who turns confusion into understanding. But beneath that clarity sits exhaustion, the tiredness of always being the one who sees and understands. You learn to survive by thinking. It became armor long before you recognized it. Each observation sharpens your mind, yet often softens your ability to simply feel. When someone hurts you, you don't react with anger. You analyze. You trace their behavior to old wounds, to insecurity, to fear. You tell yourself that awareness should remove the pain. But deep down, it still exists. You just don't allow yourself to acknowledge it fully. It's unusual, isn't it? How emotional intelligence can turn into protection. How empathy, once a strength, can slowly distance you from others. You understand people so well that you start predicting rejection before it even happens. You prepare for loss before love has a chance to grow. It isn't bitterness. It's self-protection disguised as wisdom. Insight becomes a mask, one that guards you, but also keeps you apart from the world you want to feel connected to. Psychologists call this cognitive avoidance, the mind's instinct to stay safe. By constantly thinking and analyzing, you avoid vulnerability. You avoid the uncertainty of feeling. Neuroscience finds that deep thinkers often show increased activity in the brain's logic center and reduced emotional regulation, meaning you think to survive, but in the process, forget to simply live. You convince yourself that understanding will bring peace, yet peace doesn't appear, because knowing is not the same as accepting. You can understand love and still feel unwanted. You can study happiness and still not experience it. Your thoughts protect you from unpredictability, but they also trap you inside your own mind. Sometimes you meet someone who almost reaches through, someone who makes you feel seen instead of examined. But even then you hesitate. You search for hidden meaning in their words, question their silence, treat openness as risk, because once it was. So you stay the observer, thoughtful, insightful, watching life from behind the glass, intelligent, composed, and often alone. You can explain nearly everything, except why knowing so much never feels like enough. Even the most thoughtful minds still need grounding, and science has tried to understand why deep thinkers perceive the world differently. Your mind isn't chaotic, just active. Even in silence, it carries a quiet current. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network, the system responsible for reflection, imagination, and meaning-making. In most people, this network calms when they rest. In you, it rarely switches off. It loops, revisits, replays, not by choice but by design. You don't simply experience moments. You examine them, break them down, and keep searching for meaning long after they pass. Studies show that introspective, sensitive, highly open individuals have stronger connections between brain regions involved in memory, imagination, and emotion. Your brain doesn't work in a straight line. It moves like a web. One thought connects to another. One feeling links to many more, forming patterns others may never notice. Some call it intuition, creativity, or intelligence. But it can also become overstimulation. Your mind doesn't just think about life, it absorbs it. Psychologists relate this to a trait known as openness to experience, one of the major personality dimensions. Those high in this trait are curious, imaginative, and receptive to beauty and meaning. But openness also brings emotional sensitivity, because when perception is wide open, everything gets in. Joy, pain, noise, intensity. You don't just see the world, you feel its weight. Then there's empathy, another double-edged quality. Research shows people with stronger mirror neuron responses internalize others' emotions easily. You enter a room and sense the atmosphere before a word is spoken. You feel quiet discomfort, hidden sadness, or unspoken tension. You can't turn it off. Your mind is tuned in. But constant tuning means your emotional capacity is always in use. It becomes a background hum that rarely fades. Studies also suggest deep thinkers often switch between two neural systems, the analytical network and the emotional empathic network. These systems don't always work together comfortably. When one activates, the other resists. So you move between logic and feeling, analysis and intuition, a continual internal tug-of-war. It's a subtle complexity only you experience. It's the same inner tension that fuels creativity, philosophy, and self-awareness. But it also has risk. When the systems that build meaning also amplify pain, you can get lost in depth. Thought feels like control, and reflection slowly shifts into rumination. A mind that never rests can reveal truths others miss, but it can also trap you inside them. There's a point where insight begins to feel heavy. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It appears quietly, somewhere between curiosity and overthinking. What once felt like clarity begins to feel like burden. You can't stop analyzing or interpreting until thinking no longer helps. It overwhelms. You lie awake at night, your body still, but your thoughts active, alive, and restless. You replay conversations you wish had gone differently, futures that never came true, possibilities that seem endless. It's a kind of wakefulness that doesn't require night. It follows you even through sunlight. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves that grow stronger when ignored. For deep thinkers, that shadow becomes thought itself. The same clarity that once helped you now feels like pressure tightening around the mind. Every idea opens another doorway. Every answer leads to a new question. And you begin to wonder whether intelligence is a blessing or a limitation. You find meaning everywhere, yet peace feels distant. There's a reason this feels heavy. The brain was never built to hold constant awareness. Cognitive research suggests that constant activation of the default mode network, the same system responsible for reflection, can blur the line between insight and overthinking. You don't just consider life, you examine it. You question love, pain, purpose, existence. It is both inspiring and tiring. You may feel separate from others not because you want distance, but because your thoughts often exist below the surface. Small talk feels empty. Laughter feels brief. Connection sometimes feels uncertain. You may even envy those who simply live without needing every moment to carry meaning. For them, the world just exists. For you, the world must be understood. And in seeking meaning, you occasionally lose presence. Nietzsche once noted that staring long into the abyss invites it to stare back. You begin to feel the quiet weight of being alone with your thoughts. Reflection becomes comfort and confinement at the same time. You see yourself in others' expressions, in passing remarks, in long nights awake. The inner mirror never stops, yet it rarely brings stillness. This is not insanity. It is sensitivity directed inward. It is intellect stretched to its edge. You don't stop thinking, not because you want to, but because your mind is built to ask, explore, and search. You don't think constantly, because you love information. You think because you're unsure what silence might reveal. Without thoughts, you may finally have to face emotion, and even this struggle isn't created in isolation. It's shaped by the world around you. Have you ever felt out of place in this era? Like your mind moves at a slower, more thoughtful pace the world no longer understands. You watch people rush, speak loudly, scroll constantly, eyes moving like screens, attention jumping to the next distraction. Everything feels urgent, immediate, accelerated, yet very little feels meaningful. In a culture built on noise, quiet becomes an act of resistance. You sense the tension between your depth and society's speed. You pause to think, but hesitation feels punished. You seek meaning, but meaning requires time. And time is what everyone is losing. Technology has trained attention to flicker at every alert. Even your thoughts compete with algorithms pushing what you should desire, who you should become, and how fast life should move. The result is a subtle form of suffocation, not physical, but mental. Psychologists call it cognitive overload, a burnout produced by constant stimulation without true nourishment. Research shows attention spans have dropped sharply in recent decades, not because intelligence has fallen, but because focus has been divided. Minds are split across fragments, each one chasing something new instead of understanding something real. For a deep thinker, this fragmentation feels like being disconnected from your own world. You recognize complexity, beauty, and struggle, yet culture demands simplicity and certainty. So you start to hide your depth because it unsettles others. You soften your views, simplify your thoughts, laugh at humor that doesn't resonate, all to appear ordinary in a society that confuses detachment with maturity. But underneath that adjustment, there is discomfort. You want genuine connection, meaningful conversation, real stillness, and when you try to speak with depth, it often goes unheard. Still, you refuse to become shallow, because deep thinking in a distracted world is not only uncommon, it's a form of quiet resistance. To slow down now is intentional. To feel deeply rejects numbness. To question everything protects your thinking from conformity. You resist quietly, not through volume, but through awareness. Yet, even thoughtful resistance brings fatigue. Seeing clearly means feeling deeply, and when the world accelerates, a mind full of meaning can feel left behind. There is a unique tiredness that comes from noticing everything, not from effort, but from awareness. You don't get tired from activity, but from caring hard, observing closely, and recognizing patterns others overlook. Your exhaustion isn't noise, it's understanding. You move through life with eyes that rarely rest. You notice the couple speaking tensely in the cafe, the cashier's practiced smile that doesn't reach her eyes, the friend who says, "I'm fine," with a slight tremor in their voice. You register all of it. You feel what others miss. You take it all in, and while others quickly move on, you carry small pieces with you. They linger, repeating in your mind like unfinished thoughts. That is the hidden cost of awareness. Every truth you notice stays inside. Psychologists refer to this as empathy fatigue, emotional exhaustion caused by long-term sensitivity. The same brain circuits that allow compassion can trigger stress hormones when overwhelmed. Your mind, built to protect you, interprets emotional signals as subtle emergencies. This creates a quiet tension, a feeling like you're always slightly braced for something. This is what happens when awareness grows too sharp. You begin to feel responsible for everything, for the world's hurt, for fragile relationships, even for your struggle to stay unaffected. The empathy that once felt light begins to feel heavy. You want to care, but caring feels tiring. You want to love, but connection feels weighty. You want rest, but your thoughts don't settle. You observe and absorb endlessly, thinking, noticing, feeling. Yet underneath that tiredness is something meaningful. This fatigue does not come from emptiness. It comes from depth, from seeing life clearly in a world that prefers distraction. It means your heart is still alive enough to feel. You haven't gone numb, even though numbness might be easier. Still, the burden is real. When the mind won't stop, wisdom and sadness can begin to blend. You start to wonder if understanding life so deeply takes away your ability to experience it freely. But even while questioning, something in you refuses to abandon your depth. You sense quietly that this weight, this awareness, carries purpose. Within that weight is the beginning of change. Healing doesn't come from thinking harder, but from learning how to live with thought differently. Not every feeling can be solved. Not every silence needs interpretation. Some experiences are meant to be felt instead of explained. Peace is not the absence of thought. It is learning not to believe every thought. A restless mind cannot be shut off, but it can soften. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change through practice, awareness, and compassion. The same neural loops that once held fear or analysis can, over time, learn to release. Mindfulness isn't about forcing emptiness. It's being able to sit with thoughts without being overwhelmed by them. You begin noticing small details again. Morning light on a curtain, your breath moving steadily, warmth from a cup in your hands. You reconnect with your body instead of living only in the mind. Psychologists call this embodiment, returning attention to where life actually happens. Thoughts cannot truly experience the world. Only your senses can. Slowly, you set boundaries not around people, but inside yourself. You stop letting every worry take space in your mind. You question thoughts instead of automatically trusting them. Does this thought support me or drain me? Writing becomes release, not a task, but a way to breathe out the unspoken. Creating, through words, movement, or art, becomes a bridge between feeling and letting go. And the most powerful step is connection, showing your truth without needing to over-explain it. Sitting with someone fully present, not lost in internal analysis. Sharing silence without rushing to fill it. When you live from depth, life shifts from something to analyze to something to experience. You realize the challenge was never depth. It was believing depth required pain. You were never too much. You were simply awake in a world uncomfortable with reflection. The real difficulty was not thinking deeply. It was forgetting how to feel. Eventually, after all the questions and long nights of overthinking, the mind grows tired. Not defeated, just worn from constant noise. You notice that all the searching has been circular. You followed every idea, read every map, sought every truth, yet peace was never in the end point. It was always in the quiet moments between steps. Your thoughts guided you through darkness but also kept you within it. Every answer became another question. Every insight revealed another layer. You realize the mind's chase for certainty never ends. And true freedom begins when you stop demanding answers and start allowing awareness. Science shows the brain is always active, even at rest. Electrical waves move through the default mode network. But beneath that activity is something still, something science cannot fully measure. Awareness itself. The space where thoughts appear and fade. The quiet observer behind every question. Philosophers like Alan Watts noted that thinking eventually reveals the limits of thinking. Jung called this individuation, integrating light and shadow until there is no inner battle left. As understanding grows, the need to explain fades. You choose clarity over complexity, presence over analysis. You no longer demand meaning from every silence. You stop assigning names to every feeling. You let life be unfiltered. You breathe not to control your thoughts but to remember you exist beyond them. In that stillness, you uncover something ancient, that real intelligence isn't endless questioning, but presence. Wisdom isn't knowing more, it's needing less. The mind is a useful servant but an exhausting master, and when the questions finally quiet, you hear it. The soft pulse beneath thought, reminding you of what you were seeking the whole time. You were never meant to think your way to peace, only to remember that peace was already within you.